Democrats in Congress are fighting against Republican plans to cut healthcare, voting access, and more. Helping lead the charge, Ohio Congressman Greg Landsman is here to discuss. Welcome back to Defending Democracy. I'm Marc Elias. Let's get started. Congressman Greg Landsman, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so I got to start where probably a lot of people are starting with you right now, which is you recently participated in a 26-hour-long hearing. I didn't know that the House did 26-hour-long hearings. You know, we occasionally hear about the senator who takes to the Senate floor for a really long time. I didn't realize whole committees take to the dais for that long. Talk about this and your calling out Republicans, which you did quite eloquently, for frankly lying about what was in this budget bill.
Yeah, so this is the big, beautiful bill, as they call it. It is a disastrous bill, and we're hoping that ultimately they don't have the votes and that we can kill the bill. But the bill was broken up into pieces. The tax pieces went to Ways and Means. The cutting of food assistance went to the Agriculture Committee, or AG. And the Medicaid cuts went to us at Energy and Commerce. But essentially, they want to pass, congressional Republicans and Trump want to pass a $4 trillion tax cut plan, most of which benefit the super wealthy and big corporations. Now, they are going to add trillions of dollars to the debt. And so there are deficit hawks who are very frustrated about this, but they'll accept some deficit spending. And so in order to avoid just putting all of this on the nation's credit card, they said, look, you have to find $880 billion in savings cuts to our committee. And so Republicans then the only way to do that is to cut Medicaid. So they have a $715 billion cut to Medicaid in this bill. That will cost about 8 million people health insurance. So 8 million Americans will lose health insurance, all to pay for tax cuts for the super wealthy and big corporations. The Ag Committee is 230 billion in cuts. They went about 20 hours debating, offering amendments. Democrats put up a big fight. And unfortunately, along partisan party lines, they voted to cut $230 billion in food assistance. The lowest income folks in America will lose food assistance if this larger bill passes. And then in Ways and Means, they went about 22 hours too. I mean, they were at it for the whole night. There is a $358 billion cut to the Affordable Care Act, which means another 5 million people will lose their health insurance coverage because they lost their subsidy. So a total of 14 million Americans will lose their health insurance if this larger bill passes. So the bill goes to these committees. They pass them. Again, we fought them. We kept them in our committee for 26 straight hours, arguing with them over every aspect of this bill so that the American people know exactly what's going on. And hopefully that is enough to kill this bill. And the arguments that we made, I think, were very compelling. We spent 26 hours saying this is why this bill should die, because you are not just taking healthcare away from millions of people, but you're doing it for one reason and one reason alone, and that is to pay for tax cuts for the super wealthy.
I mean, it's actually, hearing you tell this, it is extraordinary that they basically broke up. So like one set of Republicans got to brag about giving tax cuts to billionaires. Another got to sit there and cut healthcare for the neediest people in America. And the third group, it sounds like, got to take away food assistance.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you, I ask this oftentimes, and I don't quite know why I have an endless fascination with it. What do your Republican colleagues think they're doing? Like, do they just think like they are there to do whatever Donald Trump's bidding is, and like they don't care? Do some of them like believe this is actually all a good thing? Like, what is going on with them?
So I think, and I said this in my closing statements yesterday or the day before. I've lost track of time. When you sit in a committee markup for 26 hours, you lose track of the day. In any event, I said, and I truly believe this, I don't believe they came into Congress or this committee hearing wanting to take healthcare away from 8 million people. I don't think they wanted to cut Medicaid. There's some waste, fraud, and abuse across every single program that exists. And there are GAO reports that say, here are some specific things to tackle waste, fraud, and abuse. We could have voted on that and passed that in a bipartisan way in 10 minutes.
Right.
They were given an assignment. The assignment from Trump and congressional Republican leadership was, we have to pass these tax cuts that overwhelmingly favor the super wealthy and big corporations. And we need you to find $880 billion in cuts, really $1.3 trillion across multiple committees. Okay. And so, being the good soldiers they are, they came up with a scheme to take healthcare away from about 8 million people in our committee, 5 million in Ways and Means. And when you add up the cuts to healthcare and food assistance, it's $1.3 trillion. Now, if they decided that they would take the corporate tax rate, which was 35% in 2017, and then Trump lowered it to 21%, if they decided to just meet us in the middle and take it back up to 28%, which is still well below 35%, that would generate $1.3 trillion in savings. That's the exact number of cuts. So the healthcare cuts in our committee, $715 billion. ACA healthcare cuts, $358 billion. The food assistance cuts, $230 billion. That adds up to $1.3 trillion, meaning that they could leave all of this alone and everyone would keep their health care and their food assistance by just moving the tax rate by a few percentage points from 21 to 28. That's it. If that was the assignment, I think congressional Republicans would have been like, fine.
I'll be right back with more of my conversation with Congressman Landsman in a moment. I founded Democracy Docket in 2020 to be the leading source for news, information, and analysis to keep you informed about what's happening in courtrooms around the country. Our growing team is now nearly 24, and it tracks the anti-democratic groups working to undermine free and fair elections and keeps you informed on Republican voter suppression tactics and more. Please take a second to become a premium member to Democracy Docket by clicking on the link above or in the show notes below. So I want to, one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on is because of where you're from, what your district is. So you are from Ohio's first congressional district, which contains all of Cincinnati, but it is actually, a pretty swingy district. I think you won it from a Republican incumbent years ago. And it's a swing district. And so you hear from your constituents, I assume, that are both Democrats and Republicans and independents. You're not sitting in a bastion of Democratic bubbleness. And so what do you hear from them? On not just the Democrats. Like, what do you hear to the extent you can distill down? Because I realize you probably get a lot of different thoughts, but like, what do people in your district think about what has been going on for the last few months? Because I assume a lot of them probably voted for Donald Trump.
Yeah, a lot of them voted for Trump. So my district is Southwest Ohio, Cincinnati, and that part of Ohio. It's an equal number of Democrats, Independents, and Republicans. A third live in the city, a third in the suburbs, a third in the rural part of Ohio. Perfect district, in my opinion. And it's a very pragmatic group of voters. They want what most Americans want, which is they would like their government to be helpful when they need help, and their government to leave them alone in regards to everything else. Just be there to help and don't get in the way. And so what they see is a ton of chaos. That is one thing you hear over and over. This just feels like chaos. Chaos is not great for our personal well-being because it's just constant
Right.
in our face. The border stuff, we wanted it fixed, and we want immigration reform. This feels pretty chaotic and unlawful. Don't love that. We wanted someone to fix the economy and appreciate that it's broken for most of us. That the wealth gap is insane, and because there's so much wealth accumulated at the top, and with corporate consolidation, we've lost so much power, and we're just all struggling to pay all of our bills. Our bank accounts are just grim, right? That's something I hear a lot. It's just like we're having a hard time, and all we see is chaos from this administration and this Republican Congress that's just going along with it and not saying, hey, let's calm down a little bit. And then there is a level of corruption that obviously you're seeing that people absolutely hate across the board, Republicans and Democrats. You got all these billionaires who are driving the decision making. They're getting more contracts. They're obviously making out well. And then with this tax plan, somehow they get all the benefits, and low income people are going to have to either pay more for health coverage and to see a doctor or to get a procedure, or they're just going to lose their health care altogether. And then the guy goes and takes a $400 million bribe with this private jet. I mean, it's just plus the Trump meme coin, which is essentially a Swiss bank account where people just deposit money and God knows what they get for it. And both parties need to be anti-corruption, and both parties have an opportunity to be anti-corruption. One is saying this is absolutely blatant corruption, and the other one, the speaker said, that's not my lane. That is a bad place to be. And then finally, they don't like the cruelty. There's a level of cruelty, I mean, the tariffs, it's chaotic, but it's cruel in the sense that like people are going to lose their jobs if they haven't already. I mean, banks in my district and businesses have talked to me about them just pulling back. Wow. They're just not going to do much. And that hurts people. The immigration stuff, even those who are like me wanted to see real border security and immigration reform. You're just removing people without any process whatsoever and taking them away from their family. That's just cruel. It's chaotic, but it's just mean.
And it does seem to be. It's funny on the immigration stuff in particular. It seems like the cruelty is actually the point. The fact is that you have these situations in which they don't send Venezuelan migrants back to Venezuela; they send them to
El Salvador.
Yeah. They've been there was someone, I forget who it was, who was released. It was someone recently who was released who's like, look, I want to just leave the country, and they tried to hold them in custody while they removed them from the country. There just seems to be a level of it that is sort of intentionally cruel.
I think Trump will go down as being one of the most corrupt presidents ever. I think he will go down as being the first pick-me president. That I have a 13 and 15-year-old. Like, pick-me is like somebody who's just like, I'm cool, pay attention to me. But he also will go down as being, the most obnoxious TV president. Like that, it was all for TV. It's all for attention and TV. And it didn't matter if someone's family was torn apart or if somebody lost their job. It just, none of that was of concern. It was just about making for good TV because he is obsessed with attention.
So that is the other reason, in candor, I wanted to have you on, because you have been one of the leading lights, the bright lights, leading advocate. I don't know if I'd say you were a leading advocate, but you're certainly one of the leading success stories in trying to have democratic messaging be, more current, more vibrant. I don't want to insult any of the folks in the caucus doing media other ways, but you have recognized, I think, the importance of independent media, pro-democracy media, new media
Yeah.
outlets, and the like. And so, talk to me about that, both from the standpoint of why it's important, which I think people will intuit, but like, how do you get this done?
Yeah. So there's a phrase that we use a lot in politics, which is we got to meet people where they are. And I think to a large extent, people think about that in sort of real life, which means like go to their
Right.
town, do town
Right.
halls, go to their church, go to their synagogue, go to their meet people where they are in real life. Now, it is also true that you have to do that on the internet, that each of us spends some portion of our day on the internet, whether it's on TikTok or Instagram or listening to podcasts or YouTube, shows. We spend some time on the internet, and so you got to meet people where they are there too, and that's it. And so meet people where they are in real life, and meet people where they are on the internet, and so. If you believe in that, because that's a core principle of democracy and building relationships and trust and making sure that you understand what problems you need to solve, because these are the problems that are most relevant to the people that you serve, you got to meet them where they are in both instances. And so I'm trying to get more and more of our folks just to go out there and explore, which is like just go and do podcasts and meet up with influencers and go on YouTube shows and just be you. Just be the same person that shows up, at church or at a town hall, and don't try to pick up somebody else's shtick. Just do you.
So I got to ask you, like, because when you say it, it makes perfect sense, and honestly, it makes perfect sense to me. I mean, I started Democracy Docket in 2020, not thinking it would necessarily catch on the way it did. Right now, um, we have more than 425,000 subscribers to our newsletter, and this YouTube channel that we started really much more recently has 400,000 subscribers. And so there's clearly an appetite for people to get get some information, hear from people like you, and learn about politics and voting and elections through these mediums. Why is there seemingly so much resistance among Democrats, some of your colleagues, to it?
I think that whatever resistance existed is starting to fade. I
Is that
mean,
right?
yeah, I really do think I'm seeing more and more of our folks doing this stuff, these shows, and jumping on podcasts. I work with New Dems. New Dems is a caucus within the Democratic caucus. We're the largest caucus. We're about 115 members,
Wow. It's
and
half the caucus.
yeah, it's more than half the
Oh, yeah.
caucus. And I'm the comms chair, vice chair of communications. And so we've had all of our members fill out a survey to say, like, what do you like talking about? What are you really interested in? Both politically and, more importantly, to some extent, non-politically. And then we're matching them up with shows, and they love it, right? Like, this is, because some are like, one member said to me, but I hike. That's my thing. There's no podcast on hiking. And I was like, yes, there is. There's so many podcasts. And so I pulled up, I don't know if it was Spotify or the podcast app, and I just typed in hiking. And she was like, oh my God, there's so many, and like there are people there that, probably need to get connected to us. We want to pull them in. So I think people are getting over the hurdle.
Okay, so the other thing, well, first of all, I thank you for coming on. I hope you tell others in your caucus
Of
that
course.
Democracy Docket is a good place to go to talk about voting rights, elections, and
Yeah.
democracy. And I want to turn to that next. So you obviously supported the various voting bills that did not pass because none of your Republican colleagues supported them. So just for everyone's reference point, Democrats, when President Biden was in office, tried to pass, or in the House did pass, the Freedom to Vote Act, the For the People Act, the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, all of which would have dramatically expanded voting rights, protected free and fair elections, done the kinds of things that, frankly, for the 40 years prior to Donald Trump were nonpartisan and bipartisan. I mean, the Voting Rights Act had been reauthorized on large bipartisan votes. The National Voter Registration Act was a bipartisan bill. The Help America Vote Act was a bipartisan bill. I mean, these all used to be very bipartisan. Not a single one of your Republican colleagues, not one, voted for any one of those bills. None. And then ultimately they were unable to get passed in the Senate. So I sometimes say, there is more room in the Republican Party right now to be pro-choice. There is more room in the Republican Party right now to be to want to restrict firearms than there is to be in favor of free and fair elections. And I'm just curious why that is, and what we should, as Democrats, all of us, not just elected, but what we as Democrats should be doing about it.
Power, I think, is the only answer. It's the way to hold on to power is to suppress voters that aren't going to vote for them. And it's a really cynical approach, because if they build a relationship with these voters, there's probably a good chance they would vote for them. But it's power. There's no other explanation. You're trying to, stay in power or get more power by undermining people's ability to vote. And so voter suppression has been exploding all over the country since 2013, when the Supreme Court gutted the voting rights bill, as you talk about. And, it's one of the reasons why we are where we are, is because of voter suppression. Voter suppression happens all over the country, and it's typically, paperwork and driver's license, ID requirements, and all this other, absurd stuff.
Drop boxes, your state, the Republicans limited drop boxes severely.
So it's just finding new ways to add barriers for certain people, and it's incredibly effective. And one of the reasons why most, or say 50%, close to 50% of people don't vote is because of the barriers and because of voter suppression. And then there's partisan gerrymandering, which is a disaster. It has created a politics in America that is fundamentally broken. And Democrats and Republicans should be banned from doing partisan gerrymandering. And that's obviously what was in the bill. Dark money. Getting dark money out of politics will make things so much cleaner and more productive. And these three things together are some of the most important things that we can do to fundamentally change the country in a good way and shift power back to people and away from corporate interests and those in power politically. My frustration, and this is where Democrats, yes, you're right, that we didn't get a Republican, vote on the John Lewis voting rights bill when we passed it in 2021, I think, maybe 2021 or 2022. But we also didn't force a vote in the Senate. Now,
right.
And this is, Democrats, I think, need to say to the American people, look, we screwed up on a couple things. The economy has been broken for decades, and we tried to, say it was okay because GDP was okay and unemployment, but it's been broken for decades. And the only way to fix it is to fix the tax code and our regulatory policies. There has to be real fundamental changes to the economy so that everyday Americans are doing okay and their bank accounts are okay and they can pay all their bills. We also have to admit that, we didn't get it right on the border and immigration. Most of us want real border security and immigration reform. That was at the core of who we were, and we dropped that ball. We haven't had a sound, compelling, vision for education reform and improving education outcomes. Neither party has for 25 years. We own that. We also, I think, have to say we screwed up. When we had the House and the Senate and the presidency, we screwed up by not forcing a vote in the Senate, or at least trying to end the filibuster for voting rights, end the filibuster to end partisan gerrymandering. I know there was a fight. We passed it in the House. I know we tried, but because Marc, you were close to this, is it fair to say that there was a bigger push on Build Back Better and those other things than there was on John Lewis. John Lewis, to me, that voting rights bill was the most important thing that should have happened. And you needed 60 votes, which we weren't going to get with Republicans. So then we just needed to suspend the filibuster. Did we push hard enough on the Senate side to get it done?
So, look, I think that there is a legitimate question about that and whether, frankly, the bills were sequenced right. I mean,
Yeah.
I had a Republican, a former Republican, sort of a never Trumper, say to me, don't Democrats understand? Like, you need to do the voting stuff first. When the new president comes in and has the most power that they have in their administration, to do
Well,
that.
that's why was it 21 or 22? Was it because it was HR 1?
The first bill, HR 1, was the For the People Act, and you passed that. Then then the HR 4, which was the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. Then, as you recall, you then passed what was sort of the Manchin rewrite of it, which the Senate had not passed, which was called the Freedom to Vote Act. So the House Democrats actually passed 3 different bills, none of which the Senate did, and which I think maybe it would have been different if the Biden administration had taken up those bills earlier, as they did, but they ultimately did. It was much later in their agenda. But I want to pick on one of those pieces, which is the partisan gerrymandering part of those bills, and I want you to explain to the audience, because people watching this are not members of Congress, how it would be different. Like how if people had districts that were like yours. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, they're not all going to be mixtures of suburban, urban, and rural. But if rather than Democrat plus 25 districts and Republican plus 35 districts, if you had non-gerrymandered districts and you had a bunch of districts that were, I don't even know if yours is plus Democrat or plus Republican, but it's a pretty even balance. Like, we say that that's what we want, but how would people's lives be different? Like, how would constituents experience that?
I think people's lives would be fundamentally different because Congress wouldn't be so broken. Congress is broken in part because everything ends up being hyper partisan for the most part, unless somebody gets backed into a corner and they desperately need the other side, which may happen with this bill if it fails. So what would happen is that you would start to see in state legislatures, and in the United States Congress, the majority of people being pragmatic and normal and in the middle, and saying, "Oh no, let's get everyone in the room." I don't want this to just be a Democratic bill or a Republican bill. Let's get everyone in the room and figure out where the support is and what makes the most sense, and then let's pass that. And you would just be knocking out bill after bill after bill after bill, and all of these problems that never get solved because Congress is so broken and so hyper partisan. All of those things start to get solved, and then you're like, you know what? Congress is pretty cool. They're getting stuff done, and it's improving my life.
Yeah, and we wouldn't have a giveaway to billionaires and cutting Medicaid.
No, because the vast majority of these people don't want to. When I read through all of the simple tax changes, they were like, like the billionaire minimum income tax is like, it's just taxing billionaires. They just have to pay a certain amount because a lot of them find ways to not pay any taxes, or a tax rate that's dramatically less than me or you. And so if you just said, look, you have to pay a minimum tax if you're a billionaire, that's $500 billion a year right there.
Wow.
That pays for that would, like, it's so positive. Everyone's like, yeah, it's the Elon Musk tax. It would pay for free community college. It would pay for housing, like all of the housing work that we want to do. It would pay for the earned income tax credit that helped everyone pay all their bills during the pandemic as part of the American Recovery Plan. It would pay for paid family leave. I mean, it's just.
So I want to wrap up with this. You go back to your districts, your district all the time. You speak to constituents of all political stripes. And I am sure that you get a lot of people who tell you they are worried. They're worried about the economy. They're worried about their jobs. They're worried about losing Medicaid. And they're worried about democracy. They're worried that we are headed down a road in which Elon Musk gets what he wants out of a tax code. He gets Starlink, delivered all over the
in
country.
every trade deal.
In every trade deal, right? And your constituents are left holding the bag. And so what do you tell them to do? Because the biggest question I get, I mean, just to be honest with you, is people say, what am I supposed to, like, what can I do? I feel helpless. Like you, Marc, you're talking to these members of Congress and they're members of Congress, but like, what do you tell your everyday constituents that they can do to help fight the good fight?
So I think there has to be a national effort that we build, and this is something I've been working on and talking to leadership about. That is more like the civil rights movement, where there are some very specific things that we're trying to get done, and we're organizing, and we're trying to raise the consciousness of the country, and there are clear, specific things that communities are being asked to do. There's demonstrations that are strategic, and I do think that we're missing that. And it has to be something similar to like a city that goes after the Olympics, right? Where everyone's continuing to do their jobs, but like you put a team of amazing people together with an all-star leader, and that's all they focus on. I think we're missing that, so we need that. In the meantime, until we get our marching orders, it's just fight. It's just like, go online, be loud about your opinions and your beliefs. There's no harm in it. Like, be strategic, but be loud. Write op-eds. Op-eds, believe it or not, it's just like people should do as many letters to the editor as they're comfortable doing. Call into radio shows. Obviously, keep calling your members of Congress. It does help, even if it's people like me. It fires up my team when they.
Does it matter? People ask me this all the time. Does it matter? What if they're in a district with a Republican incumbent? Does it matter to them or no?
I hope so. I mean, at least for me, I get a readout at the end of every week of every call, and I look at that. It's one of the things I do at the end of the week. And I review the letters. So yeah, it should make a difference. And so keep doing it. And then big picture, we got to get serious about grassroots organizing. And this is just everybody. Like we do a program called Reach, where it's an app where, we ask people to just go out there and build a network of their own voters, make sure they're registered. If they're not registered or they got purged, help them get re-registered. And if everyone just becomes a voting voter registration, get out the vote machine, and that's not partisan. That's just democracy. That becomes a game changer.
Congressman Greg Landsman, thank you for joining me, and thank you for everything you're doing for democracy.
Thanks, Marc.
Thanks so much for joining this episode of Defending Democracy. Please make sure you're subscribed to Democracy Docket's YouTube channel by clicking the subscribe link now. Also, make sure you're signed up for Democracy Docket's free daily and weekly newsletters to stay informed on the latest voting rights and election news.